the Total Try Training perimenopause and menopause webinar. I'm just going to do some quick introduction and house rules, and I'm going to hand over to Helen. If you have any questions as we go, please pop them in the chat, and they will all be answered at the end rather than as we go. Just note that we won't be able to answer any individual medical advice because we'd need to know the full background before answering those questions. So it'll be generic topics that we can cover, and we can cover themes. If you're not sure whether your question is individual medical advice, then pop it in the chat and we will let you know if we can or can't answer it. So it's fine, don't worry. Just to let you know, this is being recorded. So if you could all make sure that you are on mute, that would be greatly appreciated. And with no further ado, I'll hand over to Helen for an intro.
Thanks, Bex. So firstly, thank you to TTT for inviting us back for part 2 of this series around perimenopause, menopause, training and performance. It's great that TTT are raising awareness and normalising the conversation around menopause. So just to start with a quick intro, my name's Helen Keeney. Some of you know my husband, who's sitting there in Lanzarote over there in the corner. He's one of the TTT coaches, and I've been coached by TTT since 2014. I'm an NHS GP working 3 days a week on the Wirral, and over the last 20 years I've developed a special interest in women's health, and over the last 5 years specifically around menopause care. So alongside that, and after going through quite a long period of sleep issues and difficulties myself and trying to figure out how to improve my sleep, I also found lifestyle medicine in 2018, which really helped address my sleep issues, but it was also a bit of a light bulb moment for me in medicine as well. Lifestyle medicine uses evidence-based knowledge and behavioural science to help make and sustain true lifestyle changes that can have a huge impact on health. I did the lifestyle medicine diploma and joined the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine to help support patients to make changes that can have some really, truly transformative results. But this takes time with patients, and sadly, time is not something we have enough of in current NHS GP. So alongside Sue Smith, who you're hearing from this evening, and Judith Callow, a physio who manages Williston Physio, who's also on the call this evening, we co-founded Flourish for Life in 2019. Flourish is a lifestyle medicine clinic looking after patients with a range of different conditions, and we've established a face-to-face and online clinic. And we're also working with businesses to raise awareness of both lifestyle medicine and menopause. What we've created has allowed us to have time with patients and using the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine: sleep, nutrition, physical activity, relaxation, stress management, connection, and the reduction of harmful substances. And we create an individual lifestyle prescription for patients. Over the last year, we've created a specific menopause clinic to combine this approach using lifestyle medicine alongside the use of hormone replacement, if required, to help women. And we've partnered with some fabulous experts in their fields around the pillars of lifestyle medicine. So we're working with experts like Jules, a lot of you know from Total Endurance Nutrition, who's joining us from Lanzarote this evening for the panel. So any questions, nutrition questions, Jules will help us with those. And but just to say, a part of our Flourish team, we've also got health and wellbeing coaches, psychologists, physios, and mindfulness experts. So just a summary, in our previous talk for TTT, which is still on the YouTube channel for catch up if you're interested or missed it, we covered what is the perimenopause and menopause, how to recognise the vast array of both psychological and physical symptoms that can occur with fluctuations and inevitable decline of our own hormones. We talked about the importance of tracking our own symptoms to become more self-aware, to recognise when this transition may be happening to you. And we talked about how this might impact you as an individual and as an athlete, and how to encourage conversations with your coach about how this might impact on training and performance. During that session as well, we also covered treatment options, both lifestyle and hormone replacement. This evening, we're going to dive into some of the specific areas, and I'm delighted to have a few of our associates talking to you this evening. So I'm just going to run through the order and then we'll dive straight into it. So first up, we've got Becky Corrin, a specialist pelvic physio. This is an area so key during this whole transition, but especially as an athlete. So if you do already have some issues, maybe postnatally or during your perimenopause and menopause, then Becky will be able to take us through a bit more learning around that. I hope also it will really help a greater understanding from any coaches that are listening, and hopefully encourage conversations between you and your coach to help around training. After this, we have Dr. Sue Smith. She's a lifestyle medic as well and health and wellbeing coach. And she's going to chat to us about how to manage energy during this transition, which can also help performance as an athlete, but also day to day. After that, we're joined by Jan Rogers, who many of you know, amazing athlete. And Jan's leading some really exciting science around the vaginal microbiome. So she'll chat a bit more about this. And then we'll move on to questions. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Becky. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Helen. Hi, everybody. So Helen's introduced me a little bit. So I'm a physiotherapist that has specialised in the area of pelvic health. So what I'm going to focus on is really pelvic floor type symptoms and dysfunctions. Pelvic health physio is probably a lesser known area of physio, and it's an often ignored area as well in terms of training. We know that the perimenopause and the menopause time is a vulnerable time for women to either develop problems with their pelvic health or maybe existing problems worsen during this time. So that's why I've been asked to talk to you all. So I've got about 10-15 minutes, I believe. So I'm going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what the pelvic floor is, what it does, symptoms and signs to look out for in terms of signs of it not functioning in the right way. Going to go through risk factors as well, and a little bit about menopause changes and also specific to athletes as well. So kind of little bite-sized pieces, but in the question and answers, just ask away. You know, if you want more information about certain areas, then just ask away. So the pelvic floor, most women tend to have heard of the pelvic floor. I'll run through where it is and what it does. So pelvic floor forms the base of your pelvis. So I guess most of you are sitting at the moment. So if you think of your coccyx, your tailbone at the back, it inserts into the side of this and the tip of this. It then runs forwards, attaches into your pubic bone at the front, but also to the sides as well. So your seat bones at the sides, it attaches into there as well. So it forms a base of your pelvis. It covers a bigger area than most women realise, I think. Most women think, oh, it's just around my vagina, but actually the bulk of it is around your back passage, and that's where it becomes important in terms of exercising it. Its functions are support. So it supports your pelvic organs, your bladder, which sits at the front, just behind your pubic bone, your vagina in the middle, womb, and your bowel at the back. And men do have a pelvic floor as well. I've been asked that a few times. It's just women's, and men have pelvic health problems. We do treat men as well, but women are more vulnerable through our anatomy and our design, if you like. So its main functions are support. As I said, it keeps the organs in the right position, gives support to your bladder when your intra-abdominal pressure rises. So if you cough or you sneeze, certainly for you guys when you're running and doing your impact exercise or weightlifting, strength training, anything that raises that pressure in your abdomen, your pelvic floor provides the support from underneath to prevent descent of the bladder and then leaking. It also helps support your bowel as well. So when you need to open your bowels, if it's not convenient to do so, or if you need to pass wind and it's not convenient to do so, then your pelvic floor helps to support and prevent you from, or help you get there in time, or prevent you from passing wind if it's wind we're talking about. It aids. It's got a role in sexual function as well, so it's got a role in pleasure. It needs to be very strong, needs to be coordinated for that to happen, or for orgasm to happen. I'm diving right into all the taboo subjects here. It has a lengthening and a relaxing function. So this is a part of pelvic floor function that a lot of people aren't aware of, and I kind of do talk a lot about, is overworking pelvic floors and pelvic floors that don't relax properly. A lot is spoken about strengthening your pelvic floor and support function, but actually pelvic floors need to relax and lengthen properly. When they're relaxing and lengthening properly, then they allow you to wee normally and properly, and they allow you to open your bowels fully and properly as well. Pelvic floor is part of your spinal stability system. So together with your deep abdominal muscles, your deep back muscles, your diaphragm, it functions to support your pelvis and your spine. Quite a big link between pelvic floor dysfunction and low back pain, and certainly pelvic pain as well. And like any part of your body, it affects other parts of your body as well. So if your pelvic floor is not functioning well, that's going to affect how other muscles are working as well. Okay, so in terms of dysfunction or things, signs or symptoms that pelvic floor is not working in the right way, some of these, the more common ones are things like leaking urine with those rises in pressure that we talked about. So for some women, it might be just a few drops when they cough or sneeze. It might be leaking when they're exercising. Tends to be with impact exercise, you're running, you're jumping, your netball, that kind of thing. For others, it might be smaller rises that make them leak. So it might be laughing, might be shouting at the kids, tripping off a step. It might require less rise in pressure to make them leak. Rushing to the toilet to get there in time, so whether that's bladder or bowel. So desperately needing the toilet, not quite getting there in time. Again, like I say, bladder or bowel. Prolapse. So vaginal prolapse is the pelvic floor not functioning in the right way. And when I talk about pelvic floor, it's not just about muscle. Can you all hear that as well? Yeah, I think that's my phone. I'll carry on and check that. So my phone just logged in, I think. So prolapse is a failure of the kind of connective tissue system, the ligament type systems may have been overstretched or damaged along the way somewhere. But the pelvic floor muscles have a role to play as well. So if your pelvic floor muscles are not functioning in the right way, and you as athletes continue to train on weakened or pelvic floor muscles not functioning in the right way, putting that consistent impact through it, then that's when things like prolapse can develop, because the muscles are allowing more strain to go through that connective tissue and ligament tissue. So prolapse is when, for those that don't know, is for when one or more of the pelvic organs descend into the vagina. So the most common type is the bladder descending. That's called a cystocele. You've got rectocele, which is when the bowel descends, and you've got uterine, which is when the uterus or the womb descends. Common symptoms of this, sometimes heaviness. So sometimes people just feel a heaviness or a pressure underneath, but equally we see that a lot with women who have overworking, overactive pelvic floors as well. So I see a lot of women, they come and book an appointment with me, absolutely convinced they've got a prolapse because they feel heaviness, but actually when we examine them, it's the pelvic floors overworking, give them like a tension type discomfort, but it can equally be a sign of prolapse. A feeling of bulge in the vagina. A lot of them are discovered when women are in the shower, they're cleaning themselves or they're wiping themselves on the toilet. They then often go on to having a look in the mirror and see a bulge there that maybe wasn't there before. Sometimes discomfort, just a feeling something's not quite right there, tampon out of place feeling, it can be described as well. A heaviness in the lower tummy, in the sacrum as well sometimes. Occasionally it can cause difficulty with emptying your bladder, emptying your bowel fully, so feeling like you can't fully empty. Bladder and or bowel can be a symptom as well, and occasionally they can cause some urgency of bladder or bowels. Symptoms are different for everyone. There's a lot of women that have prolapse and don't know they've got prolapse. So when they've studied women, about 50 women that have had a vaginal birth, around 50% of women, we would find an element of prolapse in those women. Only about 6-7% are aware of it or symptomatic of it. So it's quite a common finding. So it's not to be, it's quite scary finding, but it's common, not normal is what we say. And if you do feel you've got something mild, it's important to get it checked out and get the right rehab to prevent things worsening over time. Other symptoms of pelvic floors not working in the right way, we touched on this in terms of prolapse, but difficulty emptying your bladder, difficulty opening your bowels. Again, it can be linked to pelvic floor muscles overworking and not relaxing fully in order to allow your bowels to open fully or your bladder to empty fully. Sexual dysfunction's another one as well, so painful intercourse, or loss of ability to get aroused or reach orgasm, again, can be a sign. Equally, all these things can be signs of other medical issues as well. So it's really important, if you have any of these signs and symptoms, it could well be pelvic floor, but it could be something else. So it's important to go and see your GP and have that conversation and maybe rule out other causes. And if they're happy it's pelvic floor related, come and see someone like me for further rehab. I have no idea how I'm doing on time. But I was going to go into risk factors now. Someone maybe needs to give me the sign if I'm overrunning. Risk factors. So some people are just more at risk than others, either genetically or because of their life events and what's happened over the course of their life. Women, as I've said, are more at risk anyway. Pregnancy and childbirth, I think everyone appreciates why that puts you at increased risk. But certain things, obstetric risk factors as well. So if you've had more difficult birth, things like forceps, episiotomies, a long second stage in labours, and lots of pushing for over an hour, we normally say is a long second stage. You've had a anal sphincter injury in childbirth, so you thought 3rd or 4th degree tears, that puts you at increased risk. Back-to-back deliveries, and the age at which you had your first vaginal birth. So if you're over 30, your risk is higher, and that kind of goes up quite significantly up until kind of 38, 39. Risk would be significantly higher than someone that was maybe in their 20s when they had the first birth. Doesn't mean something's definitely, doesn't mean you're definitely going to have pelvic floor issues, but those women are at more risk. New NICE guidelines that have come out have said that those women actually, whether they've got symptoms or not, should be accessing pelvic health assessment and rehab or assessment of pelvic floor and pelvic floor training post-birth in order to prevent later on. Obviously, they're very new. They've only just come out at the end of last year. So there's lots of women out there that have had those more difficult births that didn't access at the time. Those types of women maybe should be thinking also, even though their babies might have been born 10, 15 years ago, to come and access and get the pelvic floor checked and see where they're at with it really and what they need to prevent as the years go on. Other risk factors, I mentioned genetic. So if you've got a first degree relative with prolapse or urinary incontinence, you're more likely to develop problems too. Probably because of the way your connective tissue is made up. So also women that are maybe more hypermobile, more bendy, stretchy. Definitely women with connective tissue disorders, things like Ehlers-Danlos, Marfan's syndrome, it would be more likely to develop problems. Obesity, smoking, your constipation, that's a big one. So chronic constipation, constantly straining to go to the toilet over any length of time, is constantly putting extra strain through your pelvic floor, and with time that can have an effect and put you at greater risk. The menopause, which I'll go on to, the reasons why with that. Also, we know the populations in terms of occupation, being more sedentary puts you at greater risk, but equally on the other kind of side or end of the spectrum, people who are athletic, unfortunately, so doing a lot of impact exercise, maybe in occupations where they're doing lots of repetitive lifting, carrying heavy work, they would be more at risk. And people with breathing problems, from coughing a lot, but also from the way we know breathing mechanics affect the pelvic floor function as well. So to talk about menopause, we know that the structures within the pelvis have estrogen receptors and are therefore quite sensitive to declining estrogen. So with there's receptors in the pelvic floor muscles, even the vagina, vulva, bladder, urethra. So when those estrogen levels decline, that's when you can find that these problems either worsen or start in the first place. So it's quite common that I see women that maybe say, oh, well, I've always leaked a little bit since I had the kids, you know, when I cough or sneeze, but in the last couple of years, it's markedly got worse. And then when we go into it, it's coincided with hormonal changes or perimenopause or menopause as well. So that's not uncommon. And what we hope to see is that women will start to come and see us earlier. So when they are having those small signs, they come and see us, rehab and reach their potential to hopefully then reduce the risk of things worsening significantly when they do enter the perimenopause and menopause stage. So when those estrogen levels decline, a lot of things can happen, and the same with all symptoms of menopause. It may affect some women really severely, but other women not so much. And as I say, it's not a given, and I don't want to scare people either. But the tissues can become thinner. Your connective tissue, ligament tissue can become less elastic and less flexible. Your muscles and ligaments less supportive. Tends to be less lubrication there, and a change in balance of bacteria, which sounds like we're going to be spoken to about later on, and in the pH there. So you can get the symptoms. I presume Helen maybe have spoken about this last time, but the GSM symptoms, so long convoluted, was it genitourinary syndrome of menopause? So thinner tissues underneath. You can get quite dry, might get pain with intercourse, might get some bladder symptoms, overactive bladder, rushing to get to the toilet, going a lot, and then your pelvic floor muscle symptoms as well. So all those things we've talked about before. In terms of athletes, I did a little bit of research before this, and actually even I was quite surprised at the extent of pelvic floor dysfunction within the athletic population. So when they've done some big studies and found that women, over 50% of elite athletes have urinary incontinence either while they're exercising or during their day-to-day activities. So it really is a bigger problem than I think anybody realizes. Yet when they spoke to these women, only 3% had mentioned it to a healthcare provider, and only 4% had tried pelvic floor training as well. So I think it's an area that definitely needs to be spoken about more and involved in training plans as well. So I know you said some of the coaches are watching. It's a bit of an ignored area of training. You're probably doing lots of strength and conditioning for everywhere else, but not really thinking about pelvic floor. And as we say, pelvic floor ties in with the other muscle systems as well. So potentially injury risk wise, the pelvic floor is dysfunctional, then that might increase risk of other injuries, and can often be the cause of things like SIJ pains and pelvic pains as well. So I think that's what I was going to, and then so as a kind of conclusion, I was going to say that these conditions are common but should never be considered normal, and also reassurance that there's lots of very effective, very evidence-based treatments and management strategies for these issues. It's I'm privileged to work in an area of physio that has lots of evidence behind what it does as being effective. So just speak about it. And the other thing is prevention as well. Is important for people to get checked out, see where they are with the pelvic floor health, and get guidance to prevent issues from occurring later on. So in terms of pelvic floor exercise, they do need to be individualized, like any treatment really, in terms of the lifestyle medicine. It's not one size fits all. My pelvic floor needs would be very different to somebody else's needs, even if we had the same set of symptoms. It's not just about the strength, it's about the endurance, the coordination. Is it overworking? Is it underworking? And then considering all those other factors, like is there constipation, is there pain, estrogen, lots of things to consider. But doing some self-directed pelvic floor exercises is a good start. But in an ideal world, get some guidance. And I have sent some links to websites where you can find lists of pelvic health physios that you know have got the relevant training and experience as well. So finding someone local to you, NHS and private. We're quite niche, but there tends to be in most areas 1 or 2 pelvic health physios that you can access. Okay, hope that's been useful, and hopefully it'll trigger some questions as well. I was going to say, if people don't want to ask on the question and answer forum, and you don't feel you want to raise questions that way, hopefully you will, but if you don't, then just feel free to email me any kind of questions you want to ask that way instead, a bit more confidential maybe. Okay, thank you.
Sue, shall we move on to you?
Unmute. Everybody, please excuse my voice. I am setting myself up with everything around me because I have not been very well, still not very well. And I am in the menopause era, so my brain is needing as many tools as I can have, really. So anyway, so yeah, it's really, really good to meet you all. I just love meeting this kind of person because you're all such incredible people, high performing people, very committed to what you do. I have been asked to add my perspective to the challenges of perimenopause and menopause. Firstly, a quick insight into myself. You've heard a little bit from Helen. My background is in medicine, been for over 30 years. In the last 10 years, long story, but probably quite understandable, I've become more fascinated with behavioural change and developed a career as well alongside that into coaching, specialising very much in health and wellbeing and empowering personal transformation. It's a real passion of mine. I'm also, as you've heard, lifestyle medicine doctor. I was one of the very first ones to do it in 2018. It's absolutely changed my medical career. I work alongside Helen as a co-director of Flourish for Life and really believe in the power of individualised lifestyle change. And I lead here in this arena of Flourish as the mental well-being, another big area of passion for me. And that all said, I'm also a wife and a mum of 3 girls, 2 teenage ones and 1 21-year-old. Both of my parents are alive and living close by in their mid-80s, and I'm one of a very large family. So my life is very busy. I'm now 58 and very much in the menopausal era of my life. My personal experience of menopause, I would say, is very typical, having experiences of many of the symptoms like hot flushes and night sweats in my late 40s, scarily more than 10 years ago, in my early 50s. I was on Marina, I had absolutely no idea because my periods weren't there. And my knee jerk was to push it all to one side and not focus on it at all. And I hate to admit now, but that was my strategy. And it worked really, really well for a while. I did actually do a lot now thinking back. I've learned a lot, as Helen says, about the medicine of lifestyle. And I was actually doing a lot to help the situation of what we now know to be a very inflammatory phase of our life. I ate really, really well. My nutrition was really good, and I exercised a lot at this time. As a long distance runner, something I've done all my adult life, mainly half marathons, a couple of full marathons under my belt in my late 40s. Proud to say in this community, one was under 4 hours. But basically, I just got on with it all. I was a mum, I was training, I was working as a part-time GP, I was setting up for a complete career shift. And then life hit the whole family sideways, as it does, with the family illness of around 4 years ago, adding even more layers of challenge to the situation. So my symptoms of menopause became mixed up with all those other symptoms of handling life. And I know this is a very common phenomenon. With all this, I was learning and have learned, and I know now, that there were gaps in my strategy, that in hindsight, I was not bridging them all that well at all. But I have learned a lot in the last 10 years, and I continue to do so. And I hope I can share some of these insights and tips with you briefly here. Menopause is a change, and we can't avoid it as women, I hate to tell you. And I love that the awareness now is building month by month, which is just brilliant and can only empower us as women and the men around us. And it's a really, really good thing. I think if it had been like it is now in my era, if you want, I might have kind of clocked onto it a bit quicker, even as a GP. Life is busy and these things happen. But it often comes at a time when lives can be at full pelt, and I'm sure there might be a few people that would put their hand up if they are living their life in menopause in their lives. And I believe we do need to change our approach to get the best out of ourselves, particularly when we're all wanting to perform well in our chosen sport. And I am really passionate about this being a time of opportunity, powerful and positive change. It truly is a time to pause. So with this in mind, what I wanted to talk to you about today was about energy. Helen's already told you about that. And I'm sure you can relate to the scenario, I certainly can, of turning up to a training session, or even before the training session, with energy lower than you'd like, at a very low level, maybe a lower than ideal, where the day's events have just taken so much from what you already have got to give. Work, family, the events in society and globally, with never-ending, potentially energy-sucking news. It can all get very overwhelming. And our energy is very low ebb. We go to the session and really cannot give what it needs and what we wanted to give. And we can actually beat ourselves up about it, can't we? So if we think about energy simply put can be subdivided into 3 main areas: physical, emotional and mental. So how our body is physically, with good nutrition, very much Jules' area of expertise, of course, is incredibly important and very specialized to what you're doing. Then there are emotions. How do we feel things? Are they sapping us? And what's happening in our minds? Are we managing this well? And let's, just for the fun of it, throw in menopause as well into the mix. Menopause, as Helen has outlined on the previous session, is a state of physiology where estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are dropping, not in a smooth slide-like kind of way, but more as a kind of roller coaster. So every single cell is affected, not only our bodies, but our brains. And we can experience more anxiety, more brain fog. We can forget key things and then react with anxiety and self-doubt. It become an uncontrolled, and we can react to this kind of control with the second and third wave and react to these experiences. It can be an extremely emotional phase of life. So menopause, energy and performance are inextricably linked. So no amount of ideal nutrition or perfect tapering or even HRT alone will rebalance what's happening if we don't also at the same time look at what I think are the 5 essential elements to energy. But first of all, I just want to describe what I have found an incredibly useful visual, the energy curve. So if you imagine a line here and a line here, and in between those 2 lines is green. That's where we want to be. Now, energy, as we know, is not like this, is it? We all know that energy does this. It might be actually kind of almost monthly, initially, and it may go a little bit haywire as our hormones are upping and downing in this crazy old time. I certainly had some times when I literally felt like my plug had gone, and I out of me. I was exhausted. I think looking back, it was all hormonal, but anyway, so that's our energy at this green zone. Of course, we want to stay in the green zone, and we absolutely want to be in the green zone when we're about to perform at an event, don't we? And above that is red, and below that is red. And red up is when we're overdoing it and we go into potential burnout, and when we're down, it's when we can't even get going, and we can go into kind of, you know, depression and apathy, and it can go up and down. It's exhausting. But if you actually mention some lines between those colours, so let's imagine like a band, like an amber band. And if we kind of focus in on it, we're going from green to amber to red. Now, this is really, really helpful. What we need to do is really focus in on that awareness. When are we going into that amber zone? When can we start to think of what we need to do to shift back into green? So it's not like, whoa, I'm into red. Let's just slow it down, broaden the amber, have our red flags or amber flags, if you want, to warn us, to give us those signs, to then get us back into the green zone, which is where your performance is best. So I find that really helpful. I found that very helpful for my own energy management. So what I find, the 5 areas which I've outlined presently that I can pull out is pillars, balance, boundaries, self-compassion, and how we manage our mind. So first of all, pillars, each one in turn. So Helen's mentioned these are 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, evidence to impact our health. And when we're experiencing menopause, in terms of this is inflammatory hormonal aspect of this, these pillars are a very good model to really think through our own strategy. Because I know if you're anything like me and you're an athlete, you're wanting to find solutions, aren't you? You're trying to find, what do I do, Sue? What do I do? Tell me what to do. So 6 pillars, think about them. Sleep. Are you sleeping as well as you can? Is it 7 to 9 hours? Is it good quality sleep? What can I do about this? What can I learn about this? How can I refine that? And that allows, we'll move on to the other things like boundaries, to really understand your boundaries. Am I relaxing? Or relaxing in the best way? Are we actually relaxing at all? Is it the best way for me? What I do for relaxing may be something completely different to someone else. Connecting, which is really, I feel, connecting with ourselves, with nature, and with others. Really important. We've all understood this in the last 2 years, how disconnection can really be very imbalancing, very uncomfortable, and really can affect the way we have energy. Nutrition. Are we balanced? Are we getting enough of the right components? Listened to all the amazing advice from Jules last time. You know, are you getting the right things for you at this stage of life, which is a shift really in the macros, if you want, of what you're using, and understanding how that works for you. And are you finding the joy in what you eat? Exercise. Are we doing the right things at the right time? Won't go into that. That's over to you guys. Alcohol and smoking. Are we able to reduce these to safe levels? And in my situation, I was doing the exercise and nutrition pretty well in my late 40s and 50s, but not really knowing about the science of connection, relaxation, and sleep. I am in a much better place now. I need to work on these pretty much daily. It's not a tick box done. It's literally is a lifestyle. You live it each day. So number 2, balance. Let's think of a balance board. Have you all stood on a balance board, like a round board with a ball under it? Imagine standing on that, and imagine on that board there's 8 kind of sections of it representing the areas of your life: relationships, family and friends, health, emotional and physical, finances, fun and recreation, personal development, career, community. This board is never static. It's not meant to be. Life is not fixed. It's not concrete. It's moving. But what we're looking for is not to be stuck in one sector of our life. We want to bring all the areas of our life that matter to us onto the table and to balance that. And if we grade each of these sections out of 10 for satisfaction, very simple thing, it's a life wheel, we can actually find the area in which we need to build back, rebalance. Very, very important exercise. Balance is itself felt as energy. And we all probably know this when we're in balance. It's exhausting. So next, boundaries. And often it's like me, by the time we get to this age of life, we have developed very poor boundaries at home, at work, with friends, with our PT or coach that need to be revisited and reset. Are these boundaries really honouring us and our values? Are they taking us closer or further away from what we would call, and I would call, our well life vision? Ask, what can I do to identify and define these boundaries now? Then on to self-compassion. Oh goodness, at this stage of life, I think this is key. And if we battle through it and fail to apply this, we are missing a key element for better energy. Compassion has been described as a yin-yang approach. So a yin is the gentle, soothing acts of compassion, like a bath, gentle massage. where the yang are the more fierce, like setting boundaries, demonstrating your inner strength, or speaking up your rights. And good questions to ask here are, what is the one thing I can do for myself today to take care of my emotional needs? Or what is the one thing I can do to stop people or even myself hurting or harming me? And then there's the mind. Managing the mind is vital. And I do think menopause really gets us challenged as we experience the impact of the dropping hormones on parts of our brain. And it's not all about the hormones either. Yeah, these can be replaced, but they can't rewire our thoughts. Only we can. We have to take steps to work on making the changes needed to get this working better for us. So simply put, the brain is made of two parts: the more human brain, or cortex, which is more rational, imaginative, strategic. It's the thinking part of our brain. And then there's the limbic system, as Helen's mentioned on the previous event. The estrogen receptors are very kind of clumped here. There's lots of them. They significantly can be affected when they're dropping. And this includes the emotional and memory centers, sits beneath the cortex. This part is linked to the thinking brain and the brainstem hormones and nervous system, and it can be impacted significantly, as I've said. So you may have heard of Dr. Peters and the chimp paradox. This is our inner chimp, okay? This is our emotional and reactive part of us. It's been around for millennia, and it's present in all vertebrates, and it has in fact kept the human species alive under threat with the fight, flight, fright response we all know well. The cortex, or thinking part, is relatively new, and it's really what makes up our minds. It's down to us to manage that mind well, knowing how this so-called chimp can behave. So this limbic system is designed to help us survive and react really quickly in a stronger way than the rational brain. So we need to be aware of that. So a good question to ask in these situations when you find that part of your brain really overfiring is, do I want this X emotional reaction? If it's a no, then it's probably the limbic system on overdrive. Now, if you manage this part of the brain, the best way to do that is just allow it to express itself, give it some space, step away from the feelings, sit with it. You know, it's been likened to clouds in the sky, you know, behind which the sky is blue and the sun is shining. The clouds are passing. We just need to know that. If we try and push them away, the emotions can build. And actually, one really useful tip, because of all the connections of this part of the brain, the simple act of breathing can calm this center down and give us time to regroup and respond with our human rational brain. So, you know, if in doubt, just pause and breathe. He also mentions actually why I work on a lot with my clients, which is the goblins, or I call them saboteurs. And they are the source of our limiting beliefs that with work can be reprogrammed and replaced with the best possible cheerleaders you could hope. And this I find where a lot of the work needs to be done, and is a fascinating part of personal growth. One useful fact to take away is that these saboteurs are louder and stronger if we halt, what's called HALT, which is HALT, if we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So when you're finding them loud, just take a little think, and am I tired here? Am I hungry? HALT, and that's why. There's nothing else going on apart from those things. So just be kind to yourself. And neuroscience is showing us more and more that this rewiring with new connections is something that is really, really possible. It's a very exciting part of life to explore. So menopause can be a moment in life when we literally are changing whether we like it or not. And I believe it can be reframed as an opportunity. We want to stop, reflect, rebalance, and recalibrate ourselves, our priorities and our boundaries. So I'm going to suggest a series of steps. Stop, be kind to yourself. You are experiencing peri or menopause. Inevitably will impact the way things are right now. Rethink, what is it that you really want? What is your well-life vision? What is your vision of where you want your life to be, short, medium, long term? How do you want to be turning up as each day? Understanding your brain, let yourself off what's not working and know what is needed. Watch that chimp, breathe, respond, not react, rewire the limiting beliefs and flip the negative to positive statements. Repeat as affirmations and visuals, rewire. 4, breathe, let your emotions flow past, acknowledge them, but don't let them rule you. you can be in charge of them. And we know, due to the hormonal effects of this part of the brain, that this is a big part of our experience at this stage of life. Trying to overcome thinking by thinking won't have the quietening effect you want. It can actually rev it up. And because of where the emotions are emanating from, the best way to do and to calm ourselves is with breathing. So seek out some really good breathing tools. 5, fun. Make time for fun. Whatever it is for you, do it. Enjoyment is inherent in the moment, and this is where we want to live. 6, take time to plan in the next steps of establishing the pillars, the 6 pillars. Are you enabling better sleep, relaxation, connection? They need to exist alongside the physical activities and nutrition to get the best out of your body and mind. 7, create, redefine and recreate boundaries. What are yours? When things feel wrong, boundaries are often one of the many things that need attention. And watch the energy curve. Have the Goldilocks approach, not too hot, not too cold, keep in the green zone. And 9, must say, end up with get help with hormones. This is an individualized approach that works for someone, may work for someone else, you know, may not be right for you. And that's me, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Over to you, Jan.
Okay, thanks very much. Really appreciate that, Sue. That was really, really useful. And I think it's just important to reiterate, I think, those steps. But I think for me, tomorrow, walking into the office, the respond, not react is a key one that I should remember. So thanks very much for that. And thanks to Helen and I guess TTT guys for the opportunity to talk at this webinar. I'll keep this to sort of 5 minutes. I'll try not to talk through and rattle through at speed. But I guess in 2020, myself and a few others, we left our current company and we set up a new company, which during COVID was obviously somewhat challenging, but it did give us the opportunity, I think, to look at unmet needs in our space, which is medical diagnostics and medical devices. And I have to say the decision we took may have been influenced by me, sort of having just gone through the menopause, but I like to think that it is a great opportunity for us as well. But I think, you know, we look to focus on a suitable, well, we realized that there was no suitable and a lack of suitable menopause tests. And also I think the approach people had on going to see a GP was quite challenging because the current focus is very much on illness, not wellness. When you're looking to take up a GP's time. So, you know, I love what Flourish are doing, and I think it's shifting the focus to wellness, not illness. And, you know, I think it's important as well to realize that, you know, we're probably in this space of, you know, menopause for 30 years plus. So, you know, it is important to get it right. And you know, I think we should spend the time to do that. So yeah, and I guess I'm also grateful that Becky went first because she's obviously already introduced you to vaginas. So we're all quite comfortable, I think, with that discussion now. So a little bit about where we are. So we have developed a test. So we look to develop a test, and it's really all around a vaginal microbiome. You will probably have heard of the gut microbiome and maybe even the skin microbiome. And I think how important these are to our very healthy existence. You know, a microbiome is a community of bacteria that sort of live together quite comfortably, and ideally they're in what we call homeostasis. So they are stable and they're making our lives positive. They're having a positive impact on us. I think the key to it is also that a microbiome can be changed. So if you potentially take a very poor diet that's not rich in nutrition, you will find your microbiome changes and becomes a very narrow spectrum. And then if you eat the rainbow and eat a much healthier one, you can actually change that microbiome. So it's something that is influenced by what we can do to it, whether that's, you know, health and lifestyle and diet changes, etc. So it is a very useful thing that lives with us, or in fact, actually is us, because a fact I'm sure you're well aware of, and maybe heard it many times before, is that we have far more bacterial cells in our body than human cells. In fact, our bacteria cells outnumber us by about 10 to 1, the human cells. So there is a lot of them hanging around us, and the vast majority are actually quite good for us. So it's important not to think about killing them all off. So the vaginal microbiome in a healthy woman is dominated really by one type of lactobacillus, and it's called Lactobacillus crispatus. And it's very responsive to the hormone estrogen. So during a normal healthy life, so sort of post-puberty up to perimenopause, the Lactobacillus crispatus is the one bacteria that will dominate your vaginome or your vaginal microbiome. It creates a thick mucosal layer and contains a high level of glycogen. And that bacteria, the lactobacilli, break that glycogen down and form lactic acid. And that lactic acid creates a low pH. And that low pH and that acidic pH actually prevents any other bacteria from coming in, because it's a pretty unpleasant place to live. So it actually controls what happens in your vaginal microbiome. And it prevents other pathogenic bacteria, so reduces the impact of UTIs. However, as your estrogen depletion occurs, which is going to happen, and there's no two ways about it, it's going to happen during menopause, then this has a knock-on effect to that vaginal microbiome, in that the pH starts to rise a little bit, and then other bacteria can sort of pop along and start to live in that space. So the bit that we've done really is to map out the differences in estrogen response and the bacteria that can then colonate in that area. So it's not about the bad bacteria, it's just about measuring the different bacteria that can grow along your menopause journey. And so we can map that out, and basically we look at the abundance of these and the relative abundance from one to the other. So in a healthy vaginome, you're likely to have a very high level of Lactobacillus crispatus. As you transition into menopause, as you transition into perimenopause, there will be another bacteria that can actually start to exist in that space because of the reduction in the estrogen. And that is in fact Lactobacillus iners. And then there's two other different types of bacteria that are lactobacilli species, but a different strain. Sorry, a different lactobacilli strain, but a different species. And we can measure those and start to map out where an individual is on their menopause journey, just by looking at the relative abundance of these bacteria. And we can do that from a urine sample. So what we're trying to do is just help and work with menopause clinicians. So the likes of Sue and Helen, who look at your lifestyle management and your lifestyle wellness, and they look to put a bespoke lifestyle plan in place. We can then start to say, well, this is what your vaginome looks like now. And it's very much that you're going through a transition. You've got a degree of iners, you're likely to be in perimenopause. And then look at the treatment plans and how that can take somebody back to a much more healthy vaginome, which would indicate that the estrogen level is suitable, that you've now gone back to a much higher level of crispatus. So our test really is all around I say our test, I don't want everybody jumping on the and sort of rushing over to Flourish to get it done. We're just in the process of getting the equipment to do the testing. So we're a couple of months away yet, but basically our test will support clinicians to give people a bespoke treatment, and then look at the feedback loop as to how that treatment plan is working by monitoring their vaginal microbiome and looking at the relative abundance of different bacterial species along the way. So we're really all about partnering with clinicians and providing that treatment and wellness plans, but alongside their expertise, we're developing this test that will provide the feedback for the individual and also for the clinicians to make that slightly clearer. So that's us in a nutshell.
I think that's all of us. Becky, can we leave you to do the question?
Yeah, thanks guys. That was really, really useful. There's no questions I don't think I've seen in the chat specifically, but I have got some questions that people have messaged over directly. So I'll ask some of those if that's okay. The first one, this is probably for Jules actually, is what are the benefits of taking collagen, specifically in perimenopause and menopause? And do you think it will help reduce injury?
Thanks, Bex. Yeah, so collagen's a really interesting one, and there's a lot of research kind of emerging about it, and I don't think we kind of know the whole picture in terms of what collagen can do and how it can be of benefit. I think from an athlete perspective, there's certainly potential benefit in terms of collagen being a key component of not just our skin, which people are obviously familiar with today, but also our bones, muscles, tendons. So in terms of collagen as a supplement, it can be useful to use 45 minutes or so before a training session, particularly anything with impact, so running, for instance, to keep tendons and muscles healthy. Whether you need it all the time is probably more down to an individual basis, but it's certainly something that a lot of athletes get on with if they are very injury prone, or if they have any kind of niggles and things like that, or injuries, to help kind of repair and recover from those things. So it's unfortunately not a one size fits all thing, as with a lot of nutrition things, and I'm sure any of the other kind of speakers will probably say the same with any questions that they have. There's always this kind of individual nuance to it, but yeah, collagen is definitely emerging and definitely has some place as a useful supplement for athletes, but definitely not a one size fits all, and definitely not a must have or a must use for everybody.
Thanks. And Jules, I know that you've come to talk to us a bit about nutrition and perimenopause and menopause. Do you want to give us some input into that before I go on to the questions?
Yeah, sure. So I think nutrition does have a really big role to play potentially with perimenopause and menopause symptoms. Particularly, I think the key one is probably when it comes to fueling training. So as you hit the perimenopause and then go on to the menopause, you become more dependent on your carbohydrate stores during training. So you might notice you feel more fatigued during sessions that you normally would have coped with, maybe without fueling. So I don't know, if you're used to not taking on carbohydrates during training for sessions of up to, I don't know, an hour to an hour and a quarter, it might be worth, as you kind of approach this time, thinking about adding maybe 30 grams of carbohydrates or so, if you find that you do start feeling more fatigued during those sessions. And it will also, if you do that, support some recovery afterwards, because you're not going to finish quite so depleted at the end of those sessions. So you're not going to deplete your carbohydrate, your glycogen stores in your muscles to quite the same extent as if you didn't fuel. So if you are feeling a little more fatigued from your training, then adding a little bit of fueling, just light fueling, 30 grams of carbs or so in a session of 60 to 75 minutes, and obviously more if a session is longer than that, that's probably worth considering.
Thank you very much. The next question is, if you have a coil fitted, how can you tell if you are going through menopause / perimenopause, and should you keep it in or remove it? I don't know who that's for, sorry.
I'll take that, shall I? So yeah, so the Mirena coil, that's being discussed there, it's the coil that has a bit of progesterone in it that sits in the womb and thins the lining of the womb, and it works as a contraception, and also can work as the progesterone arm for your hormone replacement. So it works incredibly well, but obviously if it switches your periods off, it's difficult to then know if you're having some period changes or some irregularity. The most important thing is, as we talked about on the previous talk, is that there's lots of other symptoms that can occur through the perimenopause and menopause. So starting to track your symptoms. So linked to the resources that we're going to attach at the bottom is the Balance app, which has been set up by Louise Newson, and that is fantastic for tracking easily your symptoms. So It may be that your periods change with the Mirena. It may be that you just start seeing worsening premenstrual type symptoms. That can certainly happen in the perimenopause. And it's really about starting to track and get a feel for yourself and your symptoms. I mean, 1 in 40 and 1 in 100 women under the age of 40 do go through the menopause. So you do need to be mindful that this happens. But once you hit 40 onwards, and certainly on 45 onwards, if you start getting different symptoms, it's very likely to be perimenopausal. And if your coil is in date and you've looked at your lifestyle and you want to trial HRT, there's a majority of women, there's not many contraindications that you can't have a trial of it. And then that actually helps if you add back a bit of estrogen and sort of stabilize some of the fluctuations, whether or not that then, that it is a very clinical diagnosis.
Thank you. And this one probably leads on from that one, actually. We started to cover it a bit then, is how do you know when to start HRT? And I think the specific wording of the question was, which made me laugh a little bit, how bad does it have to get before you go there? I think actually we all view HRT, rightly or wrongly, as like a last resort, don't we?
I think we've spoken about that in the past, that a lot of women do see it as and it's probably because it hasn't been talked about enough, is I got through it without hormone replacement and I'm going to do this naturally. Well, there's nothing natural about reducing hormones if you're getting massively impacted from symptoms. So it's about actually thinking about how they're impacting for you as an individual. What are your symptoms? Like Becky described, if you're getting urinary symptoms and even just vaginal symptoms or difficulty with intercourse, we can use different types of approaches. It's an individual approach, so there is no definite time. Certainly don't wait, don't suffer. And I know it's busy in the NHS GP surgeries at the moment, but go and see them. There usually is a menopause specialist there, or certainly someone with an interest in menopause. So it may be your practice nurse, but keep asking. If you do meet somebody who maybe doesn't quite understand or doesn't give you the time, ask to see somebody else, because actually any symptoms of the perimenopause, and there are many, I think to date there's up to about 50, start tracking, see if it's impacting you and you want to consider talking about treatment. It's worth a conversation. That consultation definitely matters.
Thank you. I've just had a live question in from training camp. So this one is, it's probably for Becky actually. Are there any specific run bike drills that might help, or should we as coaches be adjusting the balance of these sports in training programs for athletes who suffer with incontinence?
In terms of run bike drills, I'm not totally sure on. I think first of all, it's having a conversation, isn't it? I think with your athletes, and trying to maybe tease out a little bit, opening the conversation so women can open up about what might be limiting them or what they might be worrying about, but also with the athletes feeling empowered to chat about it. It's really getting a baseline of what your pelvic floor function is like, and that's going to be different for everybody. Some women will need, and that's seeing a pelvic health specialist physio, really seeing where your baseline is and then incorporating that, and we will then progress your pelvic floor kind of standard exercises into function and into training at a later date. We need to see where your baseline is first, really. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess I'd like to compare it to if we had a calf injury or Achilles injury, we wouldn't likely do one size fits all, would we? We'd all go to the physio and get our rehab exercises. So it's the same with your pelvic floor, go and get it looked at so you can get something specific for you. I guess from a coach's point of view, I would add that this type of session is so brilliant as part of the TCT community, because it hopefully enables all our athletes to feel comfortable having conversations with coaches about things that might limit you from this subject. And it might be fatigue, or it might be sleepless nights, but it might be needing to go for a wee halfway round a run, and having to dash in a bush. So yeah, it's very individual. So sleep specialists help. Thank you. Yeah, it does. The next question I have got is, this is probably quite individual, but it's probably a general subject. What's the best approach when you're not sleeping? Do you lie there awake, or do you get up, or has anyone got any top tips?
Do you answer this?
Sorry, I managed to kick myself off here. So the question was, if you can't sleep, how to improve sleep?
Yeah, and is there any, like, say I go to bed tonight and I'm just giving an example of the question that was posed, and I'm laying there awake at 2 a.m. and I can't get to sleep. What's the best thing to do? Is it just lie there and try and get back to sleep, or do you get up and have a warm shower, or is there anything that you can do?
Yeah, well, I think with sleep, it's easier to kind of, yeah, I mean, at that moment in time, you're talking about 2 a.m. in the morning, you know, think about what it is that's keeping you awake. It could be that things are on your mind. So if it is about stuff that's on your mind, then that's a clue as to what to do next time. At that moment in time, the best thing is not to lie in bed for long periods of time, tossing and turning and staying awake. The rule of thumb is to get up, move around, go back. Sleep, bed should be just for sleep, not for lying awake. This is all about wiring the brain in a positive way for sleep. But I think when I ask people about why they're not sleeping, it's important to kind of understand, is it about routine? Have they just got a terrible routine? Is it about the fact they're not having a settling down? Are they still on blue light technology till late at night? Are they having a kind of letting go of the day, you know, from work day to home life to evening to sleep? Have they got that going on? Are they exercising with you guys? Yes, you're exercising a lot. Are you exercising too late? Are you eating the right kind of things late at night? Obviously, eating late at night can keep you awake for longer. So it's looking at the person again. Unfortunately, this is all very individual, but I do think the mind often can be the thing that kind of trips us up. It's what I find with lots of people. And to be really honest with yourself as to, am I doing anything at all in the day to kind of unwind my brain, unwind my mind? Am I allowing it to relax, or am I go? What I find with a lot of myself, it was included as, you know, people that are in that kind of this world of athletics or being an athlete, it's a do approach to life rather than a be. So it's really letting go of the do and just allowing just to be present, you know, looking at things like mindfulness, seriously looking at things like mindfulness, breathing techniques at that time of night, brilliant kind of thing that you can do, because that winds down the nervous system, which then goes more into the kind of zones of sleep that you're needing to get into. So right there and then, you could try a bit of breathing, bit of a body scan, bit of a kind of mindfulness meditation. If that fails, get up, retry, and then look at how you're setting yourself up before you get to bed and how that day is working for you. And rinse and repeat until you get it right. And of course, you know, if you are not finding the basics working, look for the basic sleep hygiene advice. It might be that you need a more specialist approach.
Thank
and
you.
We do have links to really good sleep specialists in our we do have them as well, which is kind of a higher level need. So if that's a problem, then that might be interesting for you.
Brilliant. This is coming on the chat and direct. So it's similar to the collagen question. What about regular probiotics during menopause? I regularly recommend them to patients with GI symptoms or post antibiotics. They are used very frequently in Europe. However, I think the UK is perhaps behind with them being recommended mainstream. I'm not sure.
Helen?
Yeah, I mean, would Jules have anything to add on that as well? Just, you're right, they obviously are used a lot more in Europe. We do a lot of work around pre and probiotics within lifestyle medicine, and we're looking at that from usually from whole food, whole food aspects as well. But a lot of people do boost them, and especially around the use of antibiotics. I mean, what's your understanding from the research, Jules? Do you know? We dropped our connection slightly. Could you just repeat the question?
Yeah, well, I'll read it again, Helen. I was going to paraphrase, but I don't think I can. So regular probiotics during menopause. This person regularly recommends them to patients with GI symptoms or post antibiotics. They're used very frequently in Europe, but we think maybe we're behind the times in the UK. They're not tend to be recommended mainstream.
It's something, yeah, it's not kind of a mainstream recommendation, and I don't think it's necessarily something that we need to leap to. So probiotics can be really good to kind of help with gut health overall, and gut health can underpin so many, or poor gut health, I should say, can underpin so many kind of gastrointestinal issues that people might experience, particularly from an athletic perspective, in terms of feeling that people can't tolerate certain carbohydrate products to support their training and things. In my experience, you can often improve a lot of kind of symptoms of perhaps poor gut health with improvements in basic diet, which often sounds very simple in terms of making sure you get enough protein, making sure that you eat plenty of fruit and vegetables, and you're getting a good variety of foods, and also some kind of probiotic foods in there as well can help. Of course, using probiotic supplements are going to, I guess, for want of a better phrase, be a shortcut in that sense. But in my experience, a good diet and a good healthy diet with plenty of color, we talk about eating the rainbow, really can support a lot of symptoms that people experience. So that would always be my kind of first port of call with that kind of thing.
Great, thank you. And I've got one last question. This one's probably for Sue. General recommended coping mechanisms for dealing with weight gain and anxiety that tends to come with menopause.
Oh, I love that one. They're two. Oh goodness. Well, anxiety, first of all, anxiety is an emotion, isn't it? And I think one of the most important things is just to be okay with that. What we can do, and I can definitely relate, is we actually identify ourselves with the emotion. That's not us. The emotion is the emotion. We are us. And once we can separate them, we can kind of breathe and relax. We can get whipped up into that whole identity of having anxiety. As Helen's explained, the hormonal impact can make that symptom quite predominant in menopause. It's about being back to that compassion, isn't it? I think anxiety is an emotion. Once we know it's an emotion, it's something that will come and it will go. And I think we can up the game on that kind of distance, if you want, between us and the emotion. I better sit with it, breathe, and be okay with having these emotions, but still being absolutely fine. And a lot of this is down to this other thinking part of our brain, this rewiring side of our brain, where we're almost telling ourselves these stories, this big story about what we are because we have these emotions. And most of the time there's no evidence to any of this. So a lot of it is empowering ourselves to be absolutely who we are, very capable, amazing human beings. Now, in terms of weight gain, absolutely relate. It's hugely frustrating in menopause, because I've been there, kind of like I explained in my intro. It's like, I was absolutely fine running away, and then suddenly bam, it's like, this is not what I am. I think again it's about self-acceptance, self-compassion, doing the little things. These are little things, the little lifestyle habit changes that actually don't look like anything, like those little breathing exercises, the mindfulness meditation, the being present with ourselves, setting up a good sleep habit, saying really positive things about who we are, what's our identity, looking at ourselves in terms of what drives us, what are our drivers, getting really solid understanding of who we are, so the weight doesn't become again this kind of thing that starts to kind of agitate and upset us. I think hormonally, dropping estrogen does really change the situation. And I think what Helen's talked about, what Jules talked about, understanding our nutrition, and again getting that individualized approach to how we're handling our energy, what we're eating, how we're eating, when we're eating, and how we're using it around our training, is probably refining that in menopause to make it work for ourselves. That's certainly my approach. And I think it's getting outside our head sometimes and just sitting with ourselves and being compassionate. I don't know if that's quite hitting where you're wanting it, but it's such a big topic. It's such a individual, and just understand the difference between our emotions and our identity, you know, and really know that behind all of that we are not needing any fixing or any sorting. We are fine. These will come and these will go, and to really work hard at that rewiring.
Fabulous.
So, love on yourself.
Thanks, Sue. I don't have any more questions to ask, so if nobody else has anything they want to ask, I will begin to wrap up. I'm just going to share a screen which has got contact details on for all of our amazing speakers today, and I'm sure you'll all agree it's been really, really useful. Just as part of Total Try Training, we're obviously very passionate about helping to raise awareness of this topic, which is why this is the second part of a series that we've done. Part one can be seen, it's available on YouTube if you haven't seen it, and I would recommend anyone to go and watch it. This has led on really nicely from that. And as coaches, we are all making sure that all of TTT coaches are educated in this area so that we are ready to support athletes going through this. Personally, for me, who's somebody that's approaching this era of life, I think it's really important, particularly if you've spent a lot of time in the sport in your 30s and then you suddenly start to move through this era of your life. It's very different, I guess. It's very different as an athlete, and it's nice to know that your coaches know what you will experience and how to help you be the best athlete you can through that stage in your life. So if anyone's got any questions, get in touch with one of your coaches if it's related to your plan. But I'm going to share a slide now that I'll have some contact details on, hopefully without giving you too much of a view of my dog in the meantime, but you might get a quick whiz at him if you're lucky. Has anyone got any further questions that they'd like to ask or anything they want to add? And someone just give me a nod. Can you see my dog and now a screen? Oh. Can you hear me? Yeah. Can everyone see that screen?
Yeah, we can see the last resource, I think.
Yeah. 2 seconds. And there's Helen's details there. So this is recorded, guys. So we will post this on the Total Try YouTube link. There's some top tips on this slide that I'm scrolling through now, and some good resources that are available as well. But in the meantime, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye for now. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.